Hello everybody, Mustafa here. I hope that you guys are enjoying a wonderful Friday. I'm recording this video to briefly discuss the Radiohead pricing mini case that was due last week, and we didn't make enough time to discuss it to the extent that I originally liked to, so I figured I could share my ideas with you over this video, and hopefully I will receive your questions by the beginning of next session, and I'll be able to answer them. So let's dive right in. I suggested 4 questions to direct your attention and focus when you are analyzing the case. The first question is asking about the economies of their decision. So it goes like this: do you think Radiohead's plan to allow customers to name their own price for the downloaded version of their album was a good idea? Why or why not? So I want you guys to think in terms of the 4 P's and give me your arguments. The second question is asking about how generalizable this strategy could be for other artists or potentially other industries. So basically, if this pricing scheme could potentially work for other artists, and what would be the implications for the artist's economic conditions. And I want you guys to compare the more established bands and artists like U2, like Radiohead, like Lady Gaga, versus upcoming stars who might not necessarily enjoy the social capital that the established bands possess. The third question is asking about the interplay of the elements of the 4P. So I ask, will a release strategy like the one employed by Radiohead be effective in the long run? So they pulled this stunt once, but is this a sustainable strategy to be used in the long run? And specifically, I want to know, how does it affect the relationship between the artist and the record label? That's one. And the last question is, how does Radiohead's plan fit in a wider context of the way internet is affecting the music industry? So for this question, I wanted you guys to think in macro terms and do a macro analysis of the industry and say how, if or how, the industry shifts and changes allowed for this pricing strategy to actually come to fruition. All right. So in the slide analysis 1, entitled Analysis 1, and you guys have these slides available on Canvas, I discuss a couple of pointers about the first question. So I discuss how by the time of the case, around 2007, Radiohead was already a huge band with a huge following, and if it was any music band that could test these kind of strategies, it would have been Radiohead. And they went through 4 steps in order to make this plan work. Number one, they released 2 versions of their album. One was digital downloadable version, and the other one was a premium price deluxe physical album that people could buy, targeted more to hardcore fans, of course. The second step they took was they allowed fans to pay how much they wanted for the downloadable version. The third step was, they produced and distributed the album without getting help of a major record label. So this would bring the costs down. And the fourth one, obviously, they decided not to go with the retailers of music at the time and sell the album only through their own website, which gave them more control over the experience, over the data they collect, and also still keeping the costs even further down. So I'm not going to tell you what a right answer or a wrong answer could have been, because obviously there is no right or wrong answer. We just want you guys to um, argue for and against um, the decision of the band. But I want to point out three items. Number one, as I said, Radiohead was the ideal test case for this strategy. If anyone could have pulled this off, it would have been some music band in the caliber of Radiohead. And they were excited by the idea of being able to let people enjoy their music for free and potentially expand their fan base. You should understand that their last 6 albums were all success and their revenue growth was steady. So they were not concerned at all about the profitability of this new album, and they were in good shape. The second point is that for them, for the band, from an artistic perspective, at the time they were not really content with the state of the affairs in music industry. So you should understand that these are early days of iTunes proposing sales of songs for 99 cents and training customers to cherry pick their best songs instead of having to buy the whole album. And Radiohead did not like this very much because they thought that the album comes with a personality of itself, and there is work that goes through, configuration of an album, and they wanted to have this sort of anti-establishment brand image to be pinned to them, and so it made sense for them to go around the traditional distribution channels. But on economic grounds also, they had economic reasons because obviously free distribution of music means that more people will convert into fans of the band, and this means more sales for future albums. This means more ticket sales when it comes to concerts and whatnot. So these are all good reasons that put Radiohead in a place where they would actually try this. And the reason why it actually worked was because the digital technology was shifting the music industry in meaningful ways. So we're not only talking about iTunes, which was an important change, but the fact that you could download music digitally. And understand that before internet, some of us still remember that you would have to drive to the local music store and flip through the albums in order to find the one that you were actually interested in listening to. And if you were lucky and they had that in availability. But today with internet, you can just do the same thing in your pajamas, in your living room, and the music would be instantly available for you to listen. So the time, the money, the effort that goes through searching for the right music, we put all of them into one box and we call them search costs. So the search cost incurred by buyers has dramatically reduced. On the side of the seller, too, the transaction costs are reduced because, firstly, there is no need for physical distribution of the music. There is no need for physical packaging of the music, quality assurance. All of these costs, we call them transaction costs, and they dramatically reduced. So the economies of decision making in this industry is undergoing a huge shift, and we see this in this case. We saw that in the case of Lady Gaga. I have extracted a couple of facts from the case here that I would like to read out for you. So one is recorded music retail sales had decreased by $3 billion from 2006 to 2007. So over 1 year, the whole industry took a hit of as big as $3 billion. And some of the reasons why that happened was one, the proliferation of music piracy at the time. So we all know about the case of Napster and the way it went down. But it was estimated that at the time of the case, for every single track sold, 20 illegal downloads would have taken place. Another reason for the decline was obviously shifting from selling an album to selling individual tracks for 99 cents. So this pricing scheme just changed the dynamics of the music industry to a large extent. Another reason for the decline were the subscription services that, okay, now they provide millions, unlimited number of tracks available for a simple monthly subscription fee, which in most cases was less than the price of even one album. And on the supply side, also, artists had started, the trend of putting their music online for free, and they didn't ask for money, and this also brought the industry down a little bit. Now, analysis 3 shows you that in this environment, Radiohead had two obvious choices. Number one, to provide the digital version of the album for free. Number two, to sell it for a fixed price. Now, obviously, neither of them was really pleasant to the Radiohead. So they came up with a flexible strategy, which was name your own price. So they said, we're going to give it away for free. But then if you'd like to pay us any price that you would pay, we would be prepared to take it. Now, there are some really good positive points coming with this. Number one, it helps Radiohead segment their market, their customer base, so they can realize who are the customers who actually pay and who are the customers who prefer to piggyback on other paying customers. And this way, especially because they sold it through their own website, they had total control over the data. They could understand what is the 20% of their customers that actually make up 80% of the revenue. This is the whole 80-20-80 Pareto rule, right? So that is one. Number two, giving the music away for free on the top of your career just draws more fans in, and more non-fans would convert into fans. That is, again, a very positive outcome for Radiohead. This pricing strategy would create buzz in the media. There will be a lot of coverage about how this is going to go down, and this is just free publicity for the band, for the group, so that's also a positive point. And probably the only negative point would be the risk of freeloaders. And going in, Radiohead did not really have a clear idea of what proportion of their customer base are actually freeloaders and what proportion would be paying customers. However, what we know from the case is that after this project was done, they actually had a clear understanding of that, and they could reach out to the hardcore paying fans with better special offers, or trying to really pamper them. All right, so I want to move on to analysis 4 and discuss how sustainable this pricing strategy could have been. What are the consequences of ignoring labels and retailers? Now, from the discussions of the previous week on channels, you remember that we have two types of channels: the direct marketing channel and the indirect marketing channel. And the reason why we have intermediaries, we have channel members in an indirect channel is that they take on multiple functions of multiple channel functions that are critical to success of your product or service. And just by token of using members of the channel, like retailers, like recording labels in this case, the artist doesn't have to worry about those aspects of the job. Now, I want to run you through this list of functions that are performed by channel members when it comes to music industry. So one is discovering artists, developing a repertoire for the artist. It is not, something that could be poorly executed and you would expect great outcomes. Advising and guiding artists in general, advancing an artist's living, and making the expenses for them when they are working on their next album. um, Bringing up collaborations with other producers, with other artists. These are some of the deals, some of the agreements that are put forth by record labels. Funding the recording sessions, producing and manufacturing songs and albums, disputing the music, marketing the music, handling the royalty payments and the accounting issues. So these are all things that if you're not using a channel member for them, now it is on your shoulders, this responsibility. And so I want to share a little bit of insight at this point about how the whole project turned out. I have some pieces of data that you might find interesting and useful. So after the fact, ComScore did a study on this project, and we found out that nearly 2 out of every 5 downloaders, which roughly is about 40% to 38%, paid for the album. 4 out of every 10 people, 4 of them paid and 6 of them did not pay. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. Those who paid gave an average of $6, which is more than what Radiohead would have earned per sales of an album if they had pursued traditional channels of distribution. But you should also understand that $6 average is out of all the people who paid. But if you consider all the people who did not pay, then the average amount spent per paid or free download will be $2.26. Now, $2.26 on average is only 1 cent more than $2.25 on average, which used to be the share of the artist if they had followed traditional distribution channels for a physical album. For a digital album, I think that number would be cut in half, and the artist would get $1.4 per download. Now, interestingly, this is digital download, but they earned as high as close to the earnings of regular physical album sales. So one could argue that they did better. Economically, they did better. Another insight that is really interesting is that a small group of fans made this a lucrative endeavor for Radiohead, because numbers show that only 16% of downloaders accounted for 79, roughly 80% of total revenues. So you see, 16% of your customers accounted for 80% of your total revenue. This is a very good approximation of the 80-20 rule here. 1 in every 25 transactions was for a deluxe box set at $80. I believe you guys did not have access to this number in the case. So the deluxe album, again, if you divide it by all people who downloaded it, who bought the deluxe album, it yields something on average around $3.2 in revenue per transaction. And the last interesting fact that I would like to point out is the temporal pattern, the time pattern in the raw transaction, because it just revealed that the early downloaders were more likely to pay and that the freeloaders arrived later. So if this was in the class, I would ask you guys, what tweaks to this pricing strategy would you suggest to be able to actually point it towards early downloaders, because they are more probable to actually pay, and then restrict access to free digital download for later arrival people who are less probable to pay. Okay, now I'm moving on with the slides. I'm on the slide that says trends in music consumption. Excuse me. So on this slide, I answer frequently asked question, which is free consumption cannibalizing our own sales? Now, we realize from the facts in the case that it could actually trigger more sales, at least in the music industry, because there are different avenues of profit making and different revenue streams coming from retail sales of the music, merchandise, concerts, promotional deals, so on and so forth. So, and it all works by the size of your fan base. So this could actually be a very good reason why it is not cannibalizing sales. And of course, is there a threat? Here's the question: is there a threat of eroding prices in the long term? Like, people, are we training people to be price conscious when it comes to music? We certainly don't want to train those kind of customers. Look at the aviation industry. Now they have been engaged in price war for the last couple of years, and people have lost loyalty to any certain airline brand. They just look for the lowest fare for flights and they take it. And that doesn't really help these businesses with sustainability vision. All right, so I just want to end up by inviting you guys to look into the slides, especially the last two slides. I have some numbers from a survey that ComScore did, and asked people, firstly, if they were a Radiohead fan, and people said, oh, I cannot live without them. So they're hardcore fans. I like the band. They're just fans. No, not really. They're not fans. And the fourth group says who, which, people who do not know about Radiohead. And then they asked these people if they downloaded the album. And there are those percentages right here. And they asked people if they were going to pay for the album, what would be the price that they would pay. And these numbers are really interesting for you guys to take a look at. Alright, so I tried to walk you through the items that I would have discussed going into analyzing this case. And I will read your submissions over the weekend and give you feedback. I'm planning to set some time aside and grade the cases and provide you with feedback, so that going in to spring break in a couple of weeks, we will have a good idea of where we're standing and what needs to be improved for each and every one of us. Alright, everybody, have a great weekend. See you guys next week. Signing off.